Boy, was it a good news week this week. That's something near and dear to my heart and something I feel fairly passionate about ended up being in the news here this week. And if you haven't heard yet, I'm talking about that Microsoft and Nintendo has agreed in a contract to bring Call of Duty to Nintendo hardware for the next 10 years. And honestly, that's pretty crazy if you think about it. 10 years when Nintendo makes kind of whatever consoles they want to, even though it doesn't maybe appeal to the masses. You'll see that from time to time as they've gone through their own hardware, with the GameCube going to the Nintendo Wii, to the Wii U, and now to the Switch. Honestly, their consoles are all over the board, and to agree to bringing Call of Duty to Nintendo hardware for 10 years, no matter what they do, is a little mind-blowing to me. Kind of a big commitment on Microsoft's part, but still has got me extremely excited. I've been actually thinking that I should make a video here on Call of Duty with Nintendo hardware, and I just wasn't quite sure how to make it yet, and I'm glad I waited for this news to drop. Because I feel like Call of Duty used to be brave. They used to be able to take steps and risks and put Call of Duty on hardware that was inferior in hopes that they'll still capture an audience. And we saw that with the Nintendo Wii itself. But now it is flowing on back to, more than likely inferior hardware in the future with whatever Nintendo's next console is going to be. But they're still going to put it in the hands of gamers, which is fantastic. But let's take a quick look through Nintendo's history here. I actually have, I believe, all the games here right next to me. Back to Call of Duty when it used to be on the GameCube. Honestly, these games feel kind of at home on the system, especially nowadays. Playing retro gaming, it just feels right at home. Sure, the Nintendo GameCube controller was maybe missing like an extra shoulder button that was on PlayStation consoles at the time. But when you go back and play these games, they do truly feel right at home on the GameCube. Nothing too out of the ordinary jumps back to me, and so nothing. I wouldn't say it was a very high risk bringing Call of Duty to the GameCube, besides maybe the fact that the GameCube had inferior sales to its competitors at the time. But being that the hardware was fairly decent to run everything from that generation along all across the board, what was really a risk for Call of Duty, at least in the beginning, is when they started bringing things to the Nintendo Wii. At least on the launch. Now, I gotta admit, I haven't played Call of Duty 3, even though I have it here in the collection, and so I won't touch on this one too much, but I feel like Activision was probably, or Call of Duty in general, was kind of at a risk period in their career when they wondered, what do we do when we bring Call of Duty to the Nintendo Wii? Sure, it makes sense with a motion controller and sensor bar. It would make aiming feel perfectly at home, but I'm sure that they were still thinking, man, everyone is pushing HD, and for some reason Nintendo is still not in HD. But I'm glad that they still did, because it brought a game that I actually do have a lot of experience playing. In fact, it was my first Call of Duty game that I've ever played, was Modern Warfare on the Nintendo Wii. And this is when they first brought out that you could play it with the Wii Motion Zapper. Definitely an interesting handheld. I don't recommend playing it on the Zapper, but they kept pushing forward, even though they didn't include everything. I believe there was even snippets of the campaign and everything that was cut from this version, just so they could make it run on the hardware and everything. But no matter what, they still pushed for it to be on the system, and it continued along when they added World War II, or Call of Duty World at War on the Nintendo Wii, adding a lot of modes and everything onto there as well. Everything was a little bit lackluster versus its other versions, especially when we look at like Black Ops 1 here, as it only got like Kino der Toten, the zombie map, and nothing else. Nothing was ever pushed back onto the system, but they still kept continuing, and this was the first game that they added that you could finally play with a controller instead of the fact that you could only play with like motion pointer controls. And that was honestly a great thing. I know it kind of split actually the community for a little while, where people were on team controller or team motion controls, and especially made online battling pretty interesting, as there was a split on whether we should be playing with motion controls or pointer controls or with the controller. Obviously, the controller still made gameplay a lot easier, as turning around is not the easiest with pointer controls. But, you know, it's still a very interesting concept that I love going back and trying to replay Call of Duty with pointer controls. And they didn't stop there. They pushed all the way with Modern Warfare 3 on the Wii. Continued, especially at this point, the Wii was making huge sales. And so I'm sure that they still sold a pretty comparable amount of copies to justify continue bringing it as further systems became along and were pushing more higher graphics. They definitely had to split the team up to make an inferior game, but that continued to sell on the Nintendo Wii. Where they kind of got a bad taste in their mouth, though, for Nintendo is when they started releasing on the Wii U. Now, honestly, they still pushed for it, but the Nintendo Wii U just didn't quite have the sales. And honestly, I don't think too many of the people that did end up buying a Wii U were too interested in Call of Duty on the first place, because it was mainly hardcore Nintendo fans that only bought the Wii U. There wasn't too much of an outside demographic, but they still pushed for Call of Duty Black Ops 2 with zombies and multiplayer and campaign to be on the system, but where they decided to pull the plug was Call of Duty Ghosts. I think that they finally realized that there wasn't much of a system or an install base to sell at for the Wii U, and their specs were more so on the age of PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, when the new systems were out, PlayStation 4, and so they were dividing the team up to make an inferior copy when there were definitely more compatible systems that could handle the hardware, where these systems didn't, and with poor sales, there was no way that they were going to do it. Honestly, I thought maybe we'd see something on the Nintendo Switch. I mean, the Nintendo Switch has proven to make massive sales, and the hardware sales is in over 100 million. I thought maybe Microsoft now would tip their hat to Nintendo, and it looks like they are finally opening up. Honestly, it just looks like that they're just opening up a contract in general. I think they would have. They're at the point in their stage that they would bring it no matter what. And granted, Microsoft has only just recently taken over Call of Duty, and it seems like they're the ones with the massive push. But I thought maybe we would see Call of Duty make a more inferior version of Call of Duty just to sell to Nintendo players here once again, now that there's a big installment base. Now, when are we going to see the first Call of Duty? It might not be on the Nintendo Switch. We might see it here further down the line when Nintendo releases its next console that would probably, assumingly, be more powerful, more efficient at running, some more certain third-party games like this. That being said, it also definitely couldn't, especially compared to the PlayStation 5 and everything now. Maybe it would scale back again to sitting at like where the PlayStation 3 was, but in handheld form. But I think that Microsoft will still see the value in that. Who knows if we're going to get the actual games that are releasing with the new systems, or maybe like a spin-off or a Call of Duty Mobile or something. I sure hope that we see that we'll see new Call of Duty games that are just running at a slightly lower spec coming to the Nintendo consoles. But, only time will tell. We'll see. I've kind of fallen out of Call of Duty. I owned dang near all the games until the last maybe couple years. But honestly, with news like this, it's got me so interested that I'm ready to dive back in. I think when we see that Microsoft brings Call of Duty to a Nintendo system, I'm just going to want to rush out and grab the case just to make sure that it's real. And it might just get me back into playing Call of Duty again, just out of curiosity to see how it's going to operate on Nintendo hardware. Either way, maybe I'm just crazy, but I'm really excited for this transition to seeing Call of Duty back on Nintendo. What do you guys think? I'm always interested to see if it's just my crazy, maybe more nostalgic feeling since it was my first system that I've ever played it on. I'm just kind of in a boat right now that it seems like I don't really care sometimes if games aren't running at their maximum potential as I could pull from like a PlayStation 5 or something like that. There's just something about grabbing a game and playing it on a Nintendo. It just is interesting and more unique. And it feels like it brings a community together when that happens. Either way, like I said, I'm excited. Let's see how this goes. It might be a couple years until we get one, but either way, let's see what we're going to get when Call of Duty returns back to Nintendo. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace.